Hey, good morning, everybody. Shavua Tov. Let's jump right back in.
I say Boker Tov.
Boker Tov and Shavua Tov and Chodesh Tov and Shana Tova. Everything. It should all be good. Okay. We're going to jump right back into our studies of the Ramchal. And just a little review. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes reviewing from last week. So we've been on the topic for the last couple of weeks of what the Ramchal refers to as willful blindness. It's an interesting concept. It's one that I think we can all appreciate and relate to because it's something that's just part of the human condition. We don't like to deal with certain things. Certain things create conflict for us, and it's different for everybody. And one of the ways to respond to something that's providing a conflict for me is just to pretend that it's not there. But pretending that it's not there doesn't make it go away. It just allows me to ignore it for the time being. But it's not a long-term solution. And the example that I keep giving is if somebody were to be told by a doctor that they have a certain condition that's going to require them to change their eating habits or change their exercise habits, and they're not particularly interested in making those changes. So it would be nothing short of absurd for that person to respond by saying, I've got the perfect solution. I'll just pretend I never went to the doctor. Right? That's not going to help. It's not going to make the problem go away. All it's going to do is make the problem get worse and kick the can down the road so that the problem will rear its ugly head down the road in a more severe way. So that's called willful blindness. And as absurd as it is, and as much as we intellectually understand that it makes no sense to conduct ourselves that way, we all do it. We all do it, and we do it regularly. And the Ramchal is talking about how to sort of break that cycle of willful blindness. How to get around living that way. We're all human, and we're all going to do it to some extent. But how can we improve in those areas? So his suggestion is something that he's referring to in this chapter as zehirut. Zehirut means vigilance, or the way he describes it in more detail is to spend time, dedicate time, designate time, carve out time, contemplating and monitoring our ways and our actions to make sure that they are consistent with who we want to be and what we want to achieve in this world. That is the concept of zehirut, of vigilance. But he warns us that it's not going to be easy. And as soon as we embark on this attempt to practice zehirut, we can be sure that the Yetzer Hara, the negative drive inside of us, will immediately respond, and do so by piling up what seem to be urgencies upon us, to the point where we feel like we are so busy and so, in the word that uses tarud, so overwhelmed with things that need to happen, that we just simply don't have the time for the luxury of living the examined life. And that is the function of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara does a very, very good job of accomplishing that.
David, could I ask add one thing?
Sure.
So what makes it even more complicated is that willful blindness is denial in modern psychological terms. And it's one of the defense mechanisms that Hashem has also given us to cope. So you got to, it's a real juggling act, because if you dropped all denial it would be hard to take any kind of risk because everything is fraught with risk, from getting into your car to eating out or
Great point. That's a
your
very,
roof
very,
falling.
very, it's a very, very smart and wise point. It must be the goatee that you're growing, Jeffrey. That's giving you all that wisdom. But it's a really, it's an excellent point. We need to have some degree of denial, or else we would never, like you're saying, take risks or take challenges, or do things that are difficult, because we would be overwhelmed by the possibilities of how things could go wrong. So it is a balancing act. That's a very, very good point. We have to know when to apply, but it should be our choice. In other words, we should try to gain control over that attitude, as opposed to having it imposed upon us. So that's an excellent point. I just want to say one last thing about review from last week. I pointed out that one of the key weapons that we have to fight the Yetzer Hara in this area is Shabbos, because the nature of Shabbos is, and the beauty of Shabbos is that, and if you remember, I compared these three words in Hebrew that all have the identical root. And that is that on Shabbos, first we are lishbos, we stop, we cease, we rest, we stop work, we stop productivity, everything quiets down, the computers go off, the phones go off, the cars shut down, everything goes quiet. And then once that happens, we automatically are given an opportunity to contemplate our actions and monitor our ways a little bit more than we usually do. And the result of that is another word with the same letters as Shabbos, which is boshet, which means sort of a healthy form of regret or embarrassment or shame that we feel when we come to when everything slows down and all of a sudden we realize that we're not living up to our potential. And the response to that is another word in Hebrew which has the exact same letters in Hebrew, which is lashuv, tshuva, tashuv, to react to that feeling of regret and sadness about our former actions and whatever, through a process of taking back control of our lives and recommitting to our deepest values and what really matters to us the most. So that is what I wanted to share with you from review. Now, moving forward, if you look at page 48, he tells us something very interesting. And I think we read this before, but let's just read it again. This is similar to the plan of Pharaoh. Okay, so Jeffrey, we were talking before about denial. It fits in very well over here with Pharaoh in Egypt, denial, because that was where everything took place, and that was his God, right? Who did Pharaoh worship? Where did he? What did the Egyptians worship? They worshiped the Nile River. No one's laughing. Bad joke. It's not funny. Okay, now you get it. Thank you.
I got it.
Good. So it's similar to the plan of Pharaoh, the wicked king of Egypt, who said when Moses and Aaron approached him before him to a petition for the release of the Israelites, what did he say? He said, "Let the work be heavier upon the men, and let them not pay attention to their false words. For Pharaoh intended not to leave the Israelites with any free time at all, so they should not be able to even consider rebellion or formulate a plot against them. Rather, he endeavored to divert their minds from any contemplation of such matters through the pressure of constant, unremitting labor." Okay, that is Pharaoh. That is the approach of Pharaoh. And if you remember, and he says it right here, this is precisely the strategy that the Yetzer Hara employs against people. For the Yetzer Hara is a great warrior, experienced in cunning, and it is impossible to escape the Yetzer Hara except through much wisdom and great foresight. And I told you there's a key that's very helpful when trying to understand the story of Egypt and understanding Pesach and understanding redemption. And Pesach is all about personal redemption. It's an opportunity for us to break through from all those things that are holding us back. Every time you see the word name Pharaoh, Paro, in the Haggadah or in the story of the Exodus, that can also be understood synonymous with the Yetzer Hara. Pharaoh is on a human level, on a personal level. Pharaoh is the Yetzer Hara inside of each and every one of us. We all have a little Pharaoh inside of us. right? And we all, by the way, we also all have what I call our pocket pharaohs. Okay, that's called a pocket paro. And why do I call the phone the pocket paro? Because the phone does exactly what Pharaoh is trying to do to us. Every time there's an opportunity to think, contemplate, and think about our lives, right? When there's a moment where like maybe I'm about to have a insight or a breakthrough, boom, I get a notification. Like I said last week, it's an email from Bed Bath and Beyond, and I look at it and it's a 20% coupon, and I start thinking about that Keurig that I want to buy, and the next thing I know, any thoughts of tshuva are something in the rear view mirror. Okay, so we all have our pocket paro, and we have to understand that and realize it. So that is what the Yetzer Hara is going to do to us all the time. Now, when we think about Egypt, we're thinking about Mitzrayim, and trying to tie this into Pesach, leading up to Pesach, and coming soon. I hate to break it to everybody, but it's coming in less than 2 weeks. We think of Passover as the time of the redemption from exile. We think of Passover as the time of the exodus of the Jewish people and our redemption from the existential experience of exile. And that is, of course, true, but it's also true on a human level, on a personal level. In other words, there's national exile and there's national redemption from exile, exodus, geula, but there's also personal exile and personal redemption. When I think of personal exile, what does that mean? That doesn't mean that I'm going to take Dr. Pickman and pick him up and send him to some faraway land in Siberia or Cyprus or something like that. You could stay right in your very living room, bedroom, or wherever you are and be in exile. Because personal exile means when you're experiencing that feeling that that we all feel at times, that I'm just not who I want to be right now. I'm just not in that mode. I'm not in that stride. I'm not achieving. I'm not functioning in the realm that I know I can. I'm too distracted. I have too many things going on in my life. I have too many things vying for my focus and my attention. I'm split in too many directions. In Hebrew, we call that pizur hanefesh. My soul is sort of just out of place, and it's everywhere, and I can't narrow in and focus in on the important goals of life. That's the idea of galus, of personal exile. And personal redemption is the opposite. It's what we call menuchat nefesh. It's when I have that feeling, and we all feel this at times, that I'm killing it. I'm really reaching my potential right now. I'm being the person that I want to be. I'm focusing on the areas that I want to be focused on. I'm really achieving and accomplishing so much, and I'm able right now. I feel like I'm able to really shine and radiate that godliness inside of me. That's called personal redemption or geula. And this is what this time is all about. This time is all about moving from galus to geula, moving from exile to redemption. And the obstacle to redemption is Pharaoh, is Paro. Paro is the obstacle to redemption, both on a national level, in the story of our exodus from Egypt, and on a personal level. Paro is the Paro inside of us, the Yetzer Hara that's trying to spread us in every direction possible, is the obstacle to our personal redemption. And this is the time, that's why the timing is so great, because right now in this chapter, he's giving us the tools and teaching us how to overcome that obstacle, and how to reach a place of personal redemption. And how do we do it? With all the things that he's been telling us so far in this chapter, with contemplation, contemplating, and monitoring and internalizing certain truths and certain realities that he's been trying to drive home over and over again in this chapter. For example, 1, spiritual reality is also reality. Or even better, spiritual reality is reality. That's point 1 that he keeps saying over and over again in this chapter. Until we understand that and understand what that means, we're not going to be able to reach our own personal redemption. We have to understand that even though we can't see it, and even though we can't measure it, even though it's not detectable through any form of technology that we have a neshama, a soul. It's a spark of godliness inside of us. It drives us. It connects us. It gives us everything good and happy that we have in our lives comes from the neshama, the soul being connected to Hashem. And he gave us a set of guidelines and told us how we can function in the most optimal way, how we can live a healthy life, spiritual life through taking care of our neshamas. And that is when personal redemption takes place. So this idea that he's talking about over here is a very interesting idea. This idea of overcoming the attempt of the Pharaoh to hijack our personal redemption, and that's really what this is all about. And he explains this, not here in this particular source, but in other places. He explains this idea in a different way. He says that, relying on Kabbalah, because by the way, the Ramchal was a major Kabbalist. This particular book that we're studying is not really Kabbalah per se, although everything's based on Kabbalah that he writes, but in other classic works of his that are really deeply Kabbalistic, he explains this idea that all of creation, when Hashem created the universe, he created the universe by creating first, the very first thing he creates, the very first thing that Hashem creates the universe is what? What's the very first thing that Hashem creates when he creates the universe?
Light.
Michael, what do you got?
Light.
Or light. Good guess though, but there'd be light, right?
Speech.
Huh? Then?
Speech.
Speech, okay. Yes, speech exists before that, but even before that, first thing Hashem creates, before he creates?
Chaos.
Okay, chaos is in there in the beginning.
Aleph, the letters of the Aleph base.
Okay, the Torah, right? The Torah and the letters of the Aleph. Torah, yeah. But even before all that, one of the most famous philosophical paradoxes is how can there be a coexistence of an infinite being, finite space, finite existence? If there's an infinite, then there's no space, there's nowhere for the finite to exist. And that's the concept that the Kabbalists talk about of Tzimtzum. Before Hashem created any form of creation, the first thing he did was he created makom, space, a space for creation to exist within. A makom panui, an open space, a vacuum, a space where he constricted and pulled himself back and restricted himself in the sense to create an open vacuum, a space where he was removed from, at least to some degree. And then there's possibility for finite existence to exist. That's the idea of Tzimtzum. And the same thing is true with us. When we want to create anything in our lives, the first thing that we need to create is space for that thing to exist. You want to build a new house, and let's say you want to, build your dream house in Deerfield. So you buy one of those ranch houses, and what do you do before you build your dream house? Demo. You need to knock down the house. You need to plow the plot, and you need to create space to be able to build and create whatever it is that you want to create. So the same thing is true in our lives. I'm going to take a question 1 second less. That whenever we want to create anything, whenever we want to change or make a change or grow or add something to ourselves or add something to the world, the first thing we need to do is to create quiet space so that we can build that thing. And that's this concept of Zehirut, living the examined life, slowing things down, carving time in your day and in your schedule for hitbodedut, for contemplation, communication with Hashem, for meditation, for whatever it needs to be, where you can quiet things down and open up space so that now you can figure out what it is you want to create and build. Yes, Les.
I'm thinking that the really powerful concept here
is that when you're talking about the individual, you have to start with the realization, the desire to want to do that kind of growth. And the defensive mechanisms that we've been talking about are so subtle, so pervasive, they are designed to be overlooked. It's a willful process, but they are designed to be camouflaged to make it difficult to actually see them. And one of the recurring patterns to Passover and to all of the holidays is the discipline of deconstruction. It's being able to look at a set of circumstances and see beyond it that they are actually limitations that don't have any reality unless we give them reality.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well said. Well said. Let me just share with you one thing over here that's very interesting. I'm sure everyone has had a chance in their life to look into a Torah scroll. And one of the things that you notice inside of a Torah scroll is that at the end of each paragraph, what do you see over here? What is there? At the end of each paragraph?
Space.
Space. Space. Now, the Talmud addresses this question. Why is it that at the end of each idea, at each thought, at the end of each law or each teaching or each whatever, there's space? And Talmud says because Moshe needed space and time and a pause to contemplate for a moment what was just said from Hashem as he dictated it to him before he moved on to the next idea. I think that that's a very, very important idea. And by the way, there's this universal concept that when you write in paragraphs. You don't just write straight sentences without breaks, because there's something called time to think, time to internalize, time to bring something in. You know, I was thinking about this as I was preparing this talk, and you know, I have my own learning time in the morning. I set aside a time in the morning, which is about an hour and a half, and it's I have three things that I try to learn during that time. Right now it changes, but right now I'm learning Rambam, which is, you know, Maimonides Code. That's one of the things I'm learning. I'm learning Talmud Yerushalmi, which is the Jerusalem Talmud, and I'm learning Sefer Daniel, the prophets, the book of Daniel right now. And I try to give a half an hour to each. Okay. Now there's a tendency. Let's say I start with the Rambam. Let's say I start my morning with learning the Rambam. There's a tendency that when I finish 30 minutes of Maimonides, I close that book, and then almost in the same motion, I open up the Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, and I start learning the Jerusalem Talmud for 30 minutes, and then I close that book, and almost in the same motion, I open up the book of Daniel, the prophets, right? And that is a mistake. That is a mistake. That is a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is like, keep going, learn the next thing, learn the next thing. The real thing that I'm trying to work on this now that I've been preparing this idea and thinking about this idea for this class, is what I'm trying to do now is close the Rambam and stop. Close my, the first book and stop a minute or two and just ask myself some basic questions. What did I learn? What was the main message? What's the takeaway? One or two takeaways. And then open the next book and study that one and close it and ask myself the same question. And like what I want to maybe suggest to everybody here is like after a Torah class, right? Where, it's a Sunday morning. We all have things to do, places to be, places to go, and the tendency will be as soon as this class is over to run to the next activity or run to the next thing that's going on. And that's always a tendency after you've learned something to try to move on to the next thing. But we don't realize it, but that's actually the Yetzer Hara. That's actually a tactic of the Yetzer Hara. What would be a much better thing to do when we finish the Zoom, when the class is over, to stop for a minute and ask yourself 3 to 5 minutes and ask yourself a few questions. What did I learn today in my learning class, in this class? How can I apply what I learned to my life? How would I be a different person if I applied this idea to my life? Just spend 3 to 5 minutes trying to internalize what you learned. Otherwise, you're on to the next thing, on to the next thing. We never pause in our lives to take those moments as important moments. Yeah, Brenda.
I'm thinking how different that is from meditation, your mind, and contemplation with Torah. And meditation,
You came in and out. You came in and out for 1 second, so I lost a couple words in the middle.
okay. Okay, I'm thinking how different. What happened?
We got you. I can hear you now.
Okay. I'm trying to count. I'm thinking meditation is when you clear your mind, from contemplation when you contemplate, think about what you've just learned, what is entering into your soul. And today's world is all about meditation.
Right. Right.
And there's nothing wrong.
Meditation should probably happen. Maybe the meditation should be first. That creates the space.
Right.
You learn, then you contemplate. But meditation that's created that space you talked about to be able to learn. So you got to have both.
That's
That
right.
makes a lot of
Right.
sense.
Yes, and they're Brenda's making a very good point. They're very different things. I actually, the next thing I have in my notes ties in so perfectly to that you might even think that Brenda and I coordinated this in advance. But I was going to quote for you what it says in the Talmud. This is a very, very amazing, fascinating idea. It says in the times of the Talmud, they're called the Hasidim Harishonim, the early pious ones. The Talmud says the early pious people, when they would pray in the morning, they would set aside. Now, I'm not recommending anyone does this. This is not a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea right now for any of us. But 3 hours for their morning prayer session. Okay, and then it says, and then it breaks it down, and it says that they would spend 1 hour preparing to daven, preparing to pray before their prayer session. They would spend a full hour, and then it says they would spend 1 hour praying, and then they would spend 1 hour after they prayed, and that's all it says. But I think what it's telling us and what it's teaching us is exactly what Brenda just pointed out, what Michael just said, which is that, I'm not suggesting an hour, but you could take 1 or 2 minutes before you do something important, whether it's your morning prayers or it's a class that you're learning, or even if it's an important conversation that you're planning to have with somebody that is going to be of significance in some way. Just a minute of mindfulness before you go into that thing, pause for a second. That would be like the meditation, Brenda, like the clearing the mind, going into creating the open space. What am I about to do? I'm about to pray to Hashem, about to have a conversation with God. Even if you just said that to yourself, that one sentence before you started your prayers, it would be a totally different experience. And then have that experience, whatever it is. And then afterwards, when it's over, take a couple of minutes to be able to download it and to internalize it and to solidify it and to make it concrete and real afterwards. And I think that's really, really a very important and a major part of what the Ramchal is trying to teach us.
It's like the Amidah.
You can't, you're muted.
No, I hear you. No, you're good. It's like the Amidah. In what sense?
My mouth and let my lips declare your praises.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. And at the end, we say, Yiratzon, may it be your will, that my Hashem, that my prayers, and also the 3 steps backwards, and then the 3 steps forwards, go into it. And then at the end, you take 3 steps backwards again. That's all part of that process. It's not like, you just do it. You prepare for it, you do it, and then you take time afterwards to internalize it and to think about what just happened. And if we could slow ourselves down and do that, I'm talking to myself right now because, I'm so bad at this, but if I could just, even just for a minute, slow myself down before and after whatever that profound middle experience is, and sandwich it with a moment of preparation and clearing open space and a moment of thought afterwards about what just happened, it would be a different experience, completely different experience.
David, how about a metaphor just occurred to me? Hashem had to clear space, constrict himself to allow for a finite universe, but we also have to open up a vessel, right? This is a Hasidic thought. Your vessel must be open to absorb knowledge. So we have to constrict ourselves, open up ourselves to get divine light. So if we were made in the image of Hashem, this would be a reflection of the same way that he created, that we can create ourselves in his image.
That's 100% correct. That was what I was, you said it better than I did, but that's what I was trying to say in the beginning, that we look at Hashem, that Hashem created, the first thing he did was he created that open space. And we have to do the same in order to be creative partners with Hashem. And that's an excellent point. And even Moshe, I mean, think about it. Moses, the greatest prophet of all times, right? Think about how fast his processing time must have been. He was a very smart man, right? And he still needed time in between each parsha, right? To be able to, contemplate each point of each message in the parsha, right? And every new law and every new idea. So if Moshe needed that, then how much more so we need it, right? We need that time and that space to be able to process and download. Okay. All right, let's move on a drop over here. And so we said over here that Pharaoh intended not to leave the Israelites any free time at all, so that they should not be able to even consider or formulate a plot against him. Rather, he endeavored to divert their minds from any contemplation. Now, I'm not going to put this on the screen, but it's very interesting. The word, I guess I could. Let me show you over here 1 second. You see my screen?
Yes.
So the word that he uses over here, the word in Hebrew that he uses, which is to divert their minds. Divert their minds. In Hebrew, the word is lahafriya. See this word lahafriya? That's the word that the Ramchal uses to divert his mind. Now, I told you that the Ramchal is very, very, very precise in his language. So precise that the Vilna Gaon said there's not a superfluous word in the entire first 10 chapters of this book. Okay. Do you notice anything about this word? Does anyone notice anything about this word that is relevant to our discussion?
It has Paro in it.
That is 100% correct. Look at this, right? Let's see if I can do this. I'm not so good at this. Paro. That is the same word as paro. That's exactly how we spell paro in the Torah. So when the Ramchal is telling us that that the Yetzer Hara is coming to divert our minds from any contemplation, he's telling us that's paro. That is the power of the Pharaoh. That is the power of paro in our lives. We all have that paro inside of us. We all have that paro in our pockets at all times, and that is what we're fighting against. So fine. And I just thought, like, just to make this real, I mean, this is something that we all grapple with, and you think about it. Has anyone ever, had this type of experience where you're having an important conversation with somebody, maybe it's a spouse or a child or a friend or somebody who needs your help, or somebody, who's important, meaningful conversation, and you're completely distracted. Your mind is somewhere else. You just can't, I mean, I did it today. Levi came home from the army for like 3 hours today, in between going from one base to the other base. And he was home for like 3 hours, and he had to go running, and he had to take a shower. So he had like an hour. So I had like an hour with him. And even during that time, he was talking, and I had stuff in my mind, and I wasn't even focusing on him, and I was checking my phone, and all of a sudden I'm like, what am I doing? It's Paro. It's Paro. Right? But that's what we do. Or you're davening to Hashem. You know, what is davening? Davening is having a DMC with the infinite creator of the universe, a deep, meaningful conversation with the infinite creator of the universe. And all of a sudden, thoughts start popping into your mind, irrelevant thoughts about, you know, how's the stock market doing? Or, you know, when's opening day at Wrigley Field? This week? Thursday, maybe? You know, or what, you have these thoughts that go through your mind, you know, and that is called Yetzer Hara, that is Paro, that is his whole purpose of life, his whole purpose, raison d'etre, is to hafriya, to divert our minds and to distract us and to prevent us from being able to be the people that we want to be. Okay, so now just take a look at one more thing that he says over here, which I think is really important, is that he says, this is precisely the strategy of the Yetzer Hara, okay, which is what we've been saying all along. For the Yetzer Hara is a great warrior, experienced and cunning. This line, and it is impossible to escape the Yetzer Hara except through much wisdom and great foresight. He doesn't say it's difficult to escape the clutches of the Yetzer Hara. He says it is impossible. Again, there's not one superfluous word, at least in the first 10 chapters, and we're only in chapter 10 too. Okay, it is impossible to escape the clutches of the Yetzer Hara except through much wisdom and great foresight. Okay, so the only way that we have a chance of fighting the Yetzer Hara in our lives is if we do leave ourselves time to contemplate our lives, to think about our vision, our mission statement, our deepest yearnings, our goals, our deepest values, to internalize the important lessons that we learn in our lives, to leave time and space to contemplate and to monitor our ways and actions. Okay, if we don't do that, we stand zero chance against the Yetzer Hara. Okay, and then he goes on and he says on page 49, this is what the prophet means, and he's quoting the prophet Haggai when he cries out and says, set your minds upon your ways. Okay, now I will tell you over here that, again, here's an example of a bad translation. Sorry, Art Scroll is great most of the time, but that's not exactly what it says. Okay, it says Simu. Somebody help me with this translation. Chana, where's Chana? Are you there? Am I still there? Oh, there you are, Chana. Okay, Chana. What does this mean? Simu levavchem al darkeichem. How would you translate that? Chana, are you there? Chana Anderson?
Yeah. Say it again.
How would you translate this? Simu levavchem al darkeichem.
Put into yourself your way.
What is levavchem?
Yourself. Levatchem.
Levavchem.
Yourself. To yourself, isn't it?
Your heart.
Levav. Lev.
Oh,
Right?
lev. The word lev. Okay. All right.
So he says, set your mind upon your ways. But that's not what the prophet is saying over here. The prophet is saying, set your heart upon your ways. And those two comments could not be more different. So this is a poor translation. He doesn't say set your mind upon your ways. He says set your heart upon your ways, because the real work only comes when we're internalizing this reality into our hearts, into our emotions. Okay. I mean, if you were to ask a group, right? I'm not asking this group because I don't want to embarrass anybody, including myself. But if one were to ask a large group and say, okay, raise your hand, who thinks it's important to set aside time every day, or at least every couple of days, to contemplate your ways, to check in with your mission and make sure your actions are lining up with your mission? Who thinks that's an important thing to do? Raise your hand. Okay, I promise you, everyone probably is going to raise their hand. Okay, now you say to them, okay, now be honest over here. We're all friends. Okay, how many of you actually do that? What's going to be the answer? Maybe one person will keep their hand up. 0. Howard says none. Okay. I wouldn't. My hand would go down. I don't do it every day. So why? I know. Everyone just said, who thinks it's a good idea? Who thinks it's important? Everyone raised their hand. Who does it? No one. Why? Because there's a universe of difference between what I know and what I do, because I haven't brought it into my heart yet. I haven't internalized it yet. So the prophet is saying, Simu levavchem al darkechem. It's not enough to place your mind, to contemplate your actions intellectually. You have to bring it down and bring it deeper into your realm of your emotions. And then he says that Shlomo HaMelech, that's King Solomon, that's the son of King David, also stated in his wisdom, give not sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Escape like a deer from the hunter's hand, and like a bird from the grip of a snare. What does this mean? It means before you go to sleep, don't sleep, and don't put slumber into your eyes before you contemplate your ways, and before you give some time to think about, all these important things. And if you do so, you'll be able to escape from the hunter's hand and like a bird from the grip of the snare. I was just thinking about this, by the way. I had a very interesting experience last week on Wednesday. I had an opportunity to interview somebody starting this new podcast, and I ended up this really interesting interview with this guy named Mordechai Rachamim. Mordechai Rachamim is a 76-year-old Israeli. He was born in Iraq, and in 1968 he was a El Al air marshal after coming out of the special forces, combat forces in the IDF. He was hired by El Al to be an undercover air marshal, and he was on a plane that was hijacked in Zurich, and he managed to kill the hijackers. Then 4 years later, in 1972, when the Sabina Airlines flight was hijacked, he and a group of other people were brought in, and he was the one who entered the plane and shot the terrorists on that flight, on that hijacking also. And it was and the reason why I interviewed him is because the 50-year anniversary of the Sabina hijacking is coming up next month, and I wanted to interview him for this podcast. So we had a really fascinating conversation. He's been involved in security and protecting, and military his whole life. So at the end, I said, I want to ask you for a favor. My son's in the Army, and I'd like you to share with me something that I can share with him, some words of advice or wisdom or blessings or whatever. And he said to me, he said, what's your son's name? I said, Aryeh Lev. He said, okay, Aryeh, listen. He said, every single morning when you wake up, first thing you should say to yourself is, today is going to be the day that there's going to be an attack, that there's going to be a terror attack. And wake up and tell yourself that the very first thing every single day. And if you do, you'll always be ready for it. That was the advice he gave me. But as I was thinking about it later, I was thinking that if you apply that to spiritual growth, that is what we should do every single day too. Wake up in the morning and say to myself every single day, this is going to be the day that the Yetzer Hara is going to come out and attack me. And I'm ready. I'm ready and armed to be prepared, to be ready, to know. So it's not an ambush. So it doesn't come as a surprise. Okay, that advice is probably very good advice for a soldier, but it's even better advice for a spiritual warrior, to be prepared every single day, every single moment, and to always be on guard, to recognize that Yetzer Hara is always there, ready to try to bring you down, ready to try to take away any gains and any success and anything that you've achieved and accomplished until this point, and to make sure that you don't go anywhere in your life. Okay, so that's a very, very important advice. And let's just finish this paragraph. And our sages of blessed memory stated, whoever appraises his ways in this world will merit to witness salvation of the Holy One, blessed be he. So the rabbis, they're not prophets. They're just telling us, this is good common sense. If you want to see good things happen in your life, then the best, most important thing that you could possibly do is to contemplate your ways. Contemplate your ways. Think about who you are, who you want to be. Does it match up? Is it aligned? All these questions that that the Ramchal is talking about. Okay, I want to stop and leave a little bit of time for some discussion. So if anybody has any thoughts or anything that they would like to say, please jump in. Feel free.
David, how about the juxtaposition of making yourself small, clearing your vessel so that you can absorb knowledge, and still have enough self-confidence and desire to help people by sharing the information that you do have. Like the Rebbe is said to, the Rebbe said, if I know something, I can help somebody, I will do it. If I can't, I won't. And he was a extremely learned. He was an electrical engineer and probably a genius, and read several papers every single day. And someone came in for Yechidus, where he would talk to them, and they asked him a question, he would tell them what he thought the answer was. So in a way, you may think he's not full of himself, but has a lot of knowledge. He's full in certain areas, but obviously he could empty himself to absorb spiritual knowledge. So making oneself small is not shirking,
Not
from
denying
the Lord.
what you are, or denying what you if any, yeah, it doesn't, you have a responsibility, and the more you have, the more responsibility you have, and that's for sure.
Right. But at the same time, you have to have humility in front of Hashem in order to keep growing.
Totally true. Totally true. Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts, questions?
The idea of not sleeping until you kind of process things, I think is very useful at night to summarize your day with contemplation, but then and process what you did that day. But then afterwards, I think it's also important to then practice more clearing your mind to create the space so you could actually sleep, because sleep's very important to create space in your brain, and you actually do a lot of processing when you sleep. Sleep's very important, actually, that, well, A, to create the space, but B, you consolidate your thoughts during sleep a lot of times. And so I try to do that, contemplate, but then I'm able to clear my mind, and it, because a lot of people have trouble sleeping, and I think some of the issue is they may be contemplating too much, which is it's healthy to an extent, but then you also have to clear so you can sleep, because it's very important.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I guess sleep kind of works in both ways. It creates the space and creates for the next day, but it also allows you to sort of digest and internalize from the day. Hey, by the way, before we go, I just want to I'm sure everyone has been sending out emails nonstop and overwhelming everyone and blasting it, but I want to make sure everybody knows about the Friday Night Live that's coming up. I'm coming into town on I arrive on the 25th. So Tuesday night, the 26th, I'm doing like a double header class related to the Holocaust and the redemption and return to the land of Israel, and kind of in conjunction with Holocaust Memorial Day, which is the next day. And then Friday night, the 29th, we're having a Friday Night Live Shabbat dinner at the center. And it's limited space. We can only have like 60 people there because of COVID restrictions or whatever. So whoever wants to come should sign up for that. And then because we're eating, it's a sit-down meal. And then May 1st, Sunday night, May 1st, we're doing a big bar mitzvah bash celebration, 13 years of L'chaim Center. It's going to be really special. So definitely please try to join us for all of those special occasions. Okay, very good.
David, wait. You didn't talk about the necessity of having a mentor, somebody who you can bounce things off of, who will be honest and point things out to you, because the Yetzer Hara will blind you and rationalize, and you may think something that you did was either okay or not so bad, and you won't learn from it.
Yeah, very true. It's Pirkei Avot, Aseh Lecha Rav. Everyone should have a mentor, and a friend, a mentor and a friend, a mentor who you can learn things from, a friend who you can process things with. That's why Musar, what we're technically doing right now is we're learning Musar. The way Musar is really meant to be learned is with a partner, right? You can hold each other accountable, and you can be honest with each other, and you can help each other maintain objectivity. It's very, very important.